Hello and welcome. You're watching Business Plus. Here are the headlines we're tracking at this hour. Less than a week after deferring his India visit, Tesla chief Elon Musk lands in China, meets Chinese Premier Li Qiang in Beijing. And Go First revival chances fades. Delhi High Court allows lessors to reclaim 54 aircraft, lenders to decide future course of action as of today. And MDH refutes cancer-causing pesticide allegations by Hong Kong as well as Singapore, says it does not use ethylene oxide at any stage of spice production. And ICAI passes order against 3 EY affiliates for professional misconduct. Chartered accountants body flags the manner of dealings between them as well as global firms under the EY network. Are flying taxis the next big bet? IIT Madras startup the E-plane to develop electric air taxi prototype by March of 2025, even as big players like Indigo eye the sky intra-city mobility. And you're watching Business Plus. I'm Shweta Kothari. The top story we're tracking comes all the way from Tesla chief Elon Musk, who arrived in China as of Sunday, barely a week after he cited Tesla-related obligations to defer his much-anticipated India visit, where he was to meet Prime Minister Modi and founders of Indian space startup. Musk met Chinese Premier Li Qiang in Beijing as on Sunday, Tesla chief said, and is said to have in fact discussed the rollout of Tesla's full self-driving software and take permission to transfer data overseas with Chinese government officials. The surprise visit to China comes amid a sharp decline in production of Tesla units and questions raised by its investors. Tesla operates, remember, its biggest plant globally in Shanghai, producing over 1 million units of Model 3 and Model Y cars in a year. Now, Musk was expected to be in India earlier this month as the government rolled out an electric vehicle policy last month, largely to accommodate the Texas-based car maker. Surprisingly, he cancelled the visit last minute and instead landed in China. Karthik Malhotra here with me in the studio. Karthik, hi, good morning. What does this really mean for Tesla? Is it coming to India, not coming to India? That remains a question mark, but he did ditch India for China.
No doubt about that. I think, the heavy Tesla obligations, the very heavy Tesla obligations that Elon Musk cited were in the making for a much longer time than those 2 days that he was supposed to be in India for. And his surprise visit to China also at some level talks about this tech diplomacy at place. Now, what is really happening with Tesla, and there are some serious concerns in Tesla as well, with the kind of competition in electric mobility across the world and with the growth not picking up, in a manner in which it was predicted to, Elon Musk has a mountain of challenges. Number one, it has to fight the price war with Chinese players including BYD and many other Chinese players including Xiaomi, the maker of smartphones and smart TVs, now getting into electric mobility. So that is one side of the problem, where there is intense competition, due to which Tesla has been forced to cut its its price tag on the Tesla models which it sells in the US as well as China and other markets globally. At the same time, Elon Musk has also had to cull out about 10% of his staff. Now, this amounts to about 14,000 people. So the P&L and the balance sheet of Tesla is obviously stressed right now. And despite, and what we saw in the Q1 earnings last week, just a few days after he cancelled his India trip, we saw that while Tesla's revenue had grown about 12%, its profit on a YOY basis for the same Q1 of this year versus last year had slipped by about 45%. So these are obviously some big numbers which Elon Musk and the board of Tesla have to be cognizant of. Now, coming to what really happened in China, the story in China is actually a little more political than pure business. So in the case of China, I think there is obviously stiff restrictions which the Chinese government has implemented on Tesla cars. For example, Tesla cars are not allowed to enter government-owned facilities. Tesla cars are not allowed to enter military bases. And Tesla cars are now also being barred from entering exhibition halls and conference centers, simply because it seems that the Chinese government is either distrustful of Elon Musk or of an American company operating a technology-led vehicle in its facilities. And of course, it has features like sensors and cameras, which the Chinese government may be suspecting of, some sort of an espionage work being carried out by Tesla cars and remitting that data, transmitting that data back to the US. This is what the Chinese government formally seems to be, aware of and cautious of. At the same time, there is no ruling out the possibility that maybe the Chinese government is actually imposing these restrictions on Tesla just to propel its own electric vehicles like BYD and Xiaomi and many others which are now mushrooming in China in a bid to cut off the American company altogether and focus on its own domestic EV production.
Now, China is an important market for Tesla, but it does look like that there is a slowdown in China vis-a-vis what government restrictions have been imposed on Tesla for China to promote its own electric vehicles. At a point like this, how crucial is this visit for Elon Musk to actually go and prefer China for its self-driven software, for data to be shared, because there's a mandated data localization, for that data to be shared with Tesla in the US?
Absolutely. So I think the visit and the timing of the visit is absolutely crucial on two accounts. Number one, what we spoke about tech diplomacy, which you're also referring to, is by way of this autonomous car being made available through regulatory approvals for China, and this final negotiation on where is this data resting, is this data getting transmitted back to the US or not. So that is the tech diplomacy part of it. The other, the pure business aspect of Elon Musk's visit also comes at a time when globally there is a slowdown in electric cars and the number of sales which are anticipated not really being met. But the numbers instead, tell a very, very different story.
Right.
So since the first gigafactory, and it was a $7 billion gigafactory which Tesla set up in China in the year 2020, in the last 4 years, it has sold upwards of 1.7 million cars in China. Just to put that in context, last year, India sold a little under 1 lakh cars. Just Tesla cars sold in China over the last 4 years are 17 lakh. Now, to give a more YOY sort of comparison between India and China, India sold less than 1 lakh, like I mentioned, about 92,000 electric cars in the year 2023. Tesla alone in China sold over 6 lakh cars, 6 lakh 3,000 cars was sold by Tesla alone. And this is a 37% jump over the previous year, 2022, which was about 4 lakh 40,000 vehicles.
So China is an important market.
China is absolutely important.
But India is also a growing market.
So I think the message is fairly clear. Right now, Elon Musk seems to be a little risk averse, does not want to perhaps trust the Indian EV policy very much, does not. Maybe he wants to wait for the election season to end. Which a lot of people say was
changed for Tesla.
I mean, industry refers to it as the Tesla policy. So I think Elon Musk definitely wants to wait for the election season to end, be very sure that this EV policy is the best that he can get out of India, and at the same time ensure that existing markets, including China, including US, are the ones that actually fire on all cylinders to keep the Tesla EV dream alive and kicking.
And wouldn't be wrong to say at this point that China seems to supersede Tesla for its own interest as opposed to India.
So that is exactly what Elon Musk wants to fight, and that's exactly what Elon Musk wants to negotiate with China. It wants to show that it is a well-wisher. It wants to show that it is pretty much in line with what the Chinese vision for electric mobility is, and wants to position Tesla as a real formidable player in that market, not really, waiting for any sort of scheme to unfold which could, in a sense, restrict its operations in China.
All right. So Elon Musk there was on a surprise visit to China over the weekend. He, of course, ditched India earlier this month on 21st and 22nd of April, which is when he was expected to be here in India. Whether he's going to come later and to what extent has his trip been deferred or postponed, we don't know, but Elon said he will be in India and hopefully by the end of this year. But before we move on, the Chartered Accountants Body, ICAI, has passed an order against auditing Major EY's 3 affiliates and a retired partner for what I quote, professional misconduct. The Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, ICAI, also issued an order against SV Ghatilia and Associates, an LLP, and its partner for professional misconduct. The entity is not currently operational. The disciplinary committee of the ICAI has directed the firms and individual partner concerned to immediately stop existing arrangements with multinational entities, as the same is circumventing the provisions of the Chartered Accountants Act of India 1949. The order read that the respondent firm and respondents failed to point out how they were able to maintain their independence when the domain that was being used belonged to a third party, that is the multinational entity. Well, with that, it's time for a short break on this side. We'll be back with more stories on the other side. Stay tuned with Newsline.
Currently, the industry is facing a lot of challenges as far as demand is concerned. Basically, the US markets has slowed down because of high inflation.
So obviously, diamonds being a dream product, something which doesn't have a utility value or is seen as a luxury. So that obviously goes off your shopping list. That's the first item that will go off your shopping list, especially in recessionary trends.
That lab-grown diamonds are not mined, and they do away with the entire mining. So they save up on all the environmental damage that is associated with mining, and of course, the mining cost, which is why they're even more affordable.
People that is impacted by all these recessions are the artisans, are the people who work in this industry, right? But I think lab-grown diamond has allowed them to actually use their skills in the same product.
This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News 9 Plus. Download now.
Welcome back. You're watching Business Plus. MDH, the Indian Spice King, has denied allegations of pesticide contamination following reports from food safety regulators in Hong Kong as well as Singapore. The Centre for Food Safety in Hong Kong, remember, had detected ethylene oxide, a prohibited pesticide, in various pre-packaged spice products from MDH and another Indian brand, Everest, earlier this month. The Hong Kong food regulator issued a warning against the sale and purchase of MDH Madras curry powder, Sambar masala, as well as the Everest fish curry masala. Now, MDH has reassured consumers and customers in India, stating that they do not use ethylene oxide at any stage of spice production. Their products, in fact, adhere to stringent health and safety standards both in India as well as internationally. The company said that neither the Spice Board of India nor the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India has been contacted by regulatory bodies of Hong Kong or Singapore regarding these findings. They further said that the allegations lack evidence and are thus baseless and unsubstantiated. MDH, of course, Karthik, denying all the allegations, but the truth remains that Hong Kong and Singapore have found ethylene oxide in some of the pre-packaged MDH sambar masala, curry and fish masala products and have banned them.
My only question to MDH is that while you don't actively use ethylene oxide as an ingredient, obviously nobody would. The point is that the pesticides which you're perhaps procuring from your other B2B partners could very well be contaminated with ethylene oxide. So the point is that while Singapore and Hong Kong have observed through their labs, have detected, in fact, ethylene oxide, are there different standards from what is being produced in India for the export market versus what is being sold here in India? That is unlikely a scenario. So the point very much is that I think we'll have to wait for FSSAI and Spice Board of India to, in their own labs, conduct all these examinations and arrive at a final conclusion by picking up samples from the various points in the production process from MDH and Everest, and give a very, very concrete, unbiased, objective report on what they have discovered and what they have not discovered. Because if there is indeed no ethylene oxide found, then there is a very different story being played out in other developed markets, including Singapore and Hong Kong, against Indian produced spices.
Absolutely. And given that India is the largest consumer, exporter of spices in the world, has produced over, and exports over 32,000 crore worth spices in financial year 22-23. A denial at this point in time is not going to serve us any good. At least as customers, as consumers of some of those MDH spices, I would perhaps be more cognizant of what MDH does by the way of testing some of those samples.
See, I think, the message from pretty much anybody you speak to who's an expert out there when it comes to food safety and food regulations is that anything which is packaged is in any case not good for your health. So the fact that you cannot expect an MDH which has a higher shelf life, or an Everest which has a higher shelf life than the spices that you actually ground in your own kitchen to have the same sort of shelf life as the ones that that you make on your own. So the point is that there is obviously some pesticide which is being used to really grow, some preservatives being used. So a complete denial from the company is only obvious, because you're not going to raise your hand and say, hey, you know what, I discovered that yes, we have ethylene oxide. But what is surprising is that MDH has not received any notice from the Hong Kong or Singapore boards of conducting these audits, and even from Spice Boards of India or FSSAI in the matter. So I think overall right now we are at the mercy of what the report from FSSAI and the Spices Board of India really comes out as a definitive conclusion on whether or not there is ethylene oxide in the pesticide used in the production process of these spices.
Absolutely, but as a customer, I think I would be wary of using some of those spices until there is a clean chit given to both MDH as well as Everest. So denial perhaps not going to serve any good to either Everest or MDH. Perhaps sampling and testing of some of those samples will do good to put to rest fears of its customers. But moving on to Go First now, whose revival chances have completely faded. The Delhi High Court has instructed the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, DGCA, to proceed with deregistering and surrendering all aircraft to the lessors. The High Court ruling has permitted lessors to reclaim the 54 Go First aircraft, ending creditors' hope of obtaining a favourable valuation for the now defunct airline. Without the planes, there are a very few assets left for the airline to be sold as a viable entity, potentially disrupting the current bankruptcy proceedings with no prospect of revival. The lenders will meet today to determine the future course of action. What could be the future course of action? If there are no aircraft, there is little to no value that Go First offers.
You're right, and even before the Delhi High Court blow really to Go First came, and that pretty much has sent the entire valuation negotiation process into a tizzy, simply because you had at least something, and that something was aircraft grounded with lessors having no access to it. The Delhi High Court ruling on Friday has pretty much quashed all those expectations, and lessors in the next 5 days or so are likely to reclaim the aircraft, and DGCA has instructed the airline to deregister all these aircraft. So this is one part of the story. The second part of the story is that even before the Delhi High Court order came in, the negotiations, and there are exactly two bidders who have qualified to bid for Go First. The best offer was actually from the consortium formed between Ajay Singh of SpiceJet and Nishan Pitti of Ease My Trip. And between the two of them, that consortium was able to cough up a total valuation of just about 1600 crore rupees for the aircraft. 1600 crore rupees plus whatever dues in terms of salary, etc., for the last almost 10-11 months now, which was to be paid. In fact, we are nearing almost 1 year. 2nd May last year was when Go First actually came down and ceased operations and filed for voluntary liquidation. We are almost on that 1 year anniversary right now, but even as we speak, the 1600 crore rupees, which was the bid value by this consortium, was not pretty much anywhere near what Go First owes to its creditors. And that figure is about 6,500 crore rupees. Parallelly, Go First is also embroiled in the Singapore arbitration court case against Pratt & Whitney for faulty engines, leading to what Go First calls this voluntary liquidation or voluntary insolvency that Go First had to file for. Now, Go First has actually put a claim of about 8,000 crore rupees in that lawsuit. So if things were to turn in favor of Go First, then that 8,000 crore rupees or any other agreed amount as per the court ruling is something that Go First could get, which I think is enough for it to pay its creditors at least. But will the lessors who own the aircraft and would have perhaps taken the aircraft back and distributed them among other airlines in India or outside India, will they be willing to come back to the table and offer these services back to Go First is another question altogether. So where we stand right now, I think one thing is very clear. Everything now in the case of Go First rests on the Singapore tribunal, and if that were to rule in favor of Go First, there could be some fresh fund inflow for Go First, which can pay off creditors and which can give it some lease of life with the lessors to take some aircraft back and at least start flying, maybe with 6 aircraft, 10 aircraft, 12 aircraft to begin with and gradually expand. But if that ruling...
if the Singapore arbitration comes in favor, it's a big if.
But if Go First were to liquidate before that, or if that ruling was not to come in favor of Go First, then it seems Go First has pretty much hit the end of the runway and it's not taking off from here.
Looks like that decision will be made today. But liquidation seems the only plausible option with the 1600 crore valuation that the bid made was when the 54 aircraft were still
unfortunately, I
with
think if
Go
the
First?
liquidation process happens, then the 1,600 crores is thrown out of the window because
Absolutely.
then nobody is
There
really
is no
putting in
bidding.
that money.
Absolutely.
Then I think the only parcel of land in Thane which is available to Go First, which has a future development value of about 2,000 crore rupees, is the only
That would be the
mortgage that
attested
Go
value.
First can use, in defense of this liquidation. And 2,000 crore rupees is all that will be left to be distributed to all creditors, and they still end up losing a good 4,500 crores, if not more.
All right, so whether Go First will still come back, not come back, we don't know. Perhaps Singapore arbitration and a ruling in Go First's case in favor of Go First will decide the future course of action for Go First. But for now, it's time for a break here. We'll be back in just a bit.
For the very first time in our investigation, we unmasked the killer of Ravindra Matre.
In 5G, we have to stand with the world, and in 6G, we have to lead the world.
Winning a Grammy was an absolutely surreal experience.
$20,000 people dead and counting. What's happening in the United States of America is unprecedented. You will have to pay for this.
How do you fulfill that promise? Because ultimately expectations have to be met. If you look at the political landscape, is it really changing for women? And what is the inability of the forces that dead bodies surface but not the living people?
Why is the state not looking at putting an embargo on that?
As a Telangana person, I will not accept.
How do ordinary folks deal with this?
Welcome back. You're watching Business Plus. India could have its own flying taxi soon. A Chennai-based startup from IIT Madras, the e-plane company, expects to develop a certifiable prototype of a flying electric taxi by March of next year as it works on ways to alleviate urban congestion in India. The company also aims to initially commercialize its drones that can carry payload of 2 to 6 kgs in coming months. The company is developing an eVTOL, an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. To begin with, it will be a 3 to 4 seater plane which can be converted into an air ambulance. The e-plane will take only 14 minutes to reach a place that takes usually 60 minutes by a personal vehicle. Meanwhile, Interglobe Enterprises and the US-based Archer Aviation also plan to launch an all-electric air taxi in India in 2026 that will carry passengers from Connaught Place to the national capital to Gurugram in Haryana in just about 7 minutes. So be it March of next year or 2026, India is getting a flying taxi. Looks like it.
I mean, from the interest which the players are generating in the market, from the startup that you mentioned, the Chennai-based e-plane company startup, to the leading airline in the country, Indigo, and the parent company Interglobe Aviation, to also the go-in-betweens, the private charter carriers and the private jets, the likes of Jet Set Go, led by Kanika Tekriwal. All of them are actually placing these large orders and stitching up these partnerships to have these vertical takeoff and lift electric flying taxis. I think what we have seen with drone deliveries has, to sum it up in one word, been a failure.
Okay.
India, and not just India, actually even globally, even in the developed markets, we haven't really seen drone deliveries take off simply because they pose some sort of a threat. They pose a threat to surveillance, they pose a threat to national security, and of course crashes cannot be ruled out as well. So the point is, while India is definitely inching a little towards flying taxis, and if you ask me, it's definitely a need of the hour, but a lot of it will be determined by how much is it going to cost you to take a flying taxi from Connaught Place to Gurugram, and are those 7 minutes, the flying time that it takes, going to compensate enough for the exorbitant prices that you're likely to pay for these taxis. But that is one part of the story. I think the larger
but that would
regulatory...
also be the initial capital investment. I
Absolutely,
believe it
absolutely.
can be made
so I think
commercial.
it'll eventually be a question
And
of
a profit
economies of
making.
scale, how
Right.
many people are willing to take these taxis and what is the kind of value these taxis are attracting, and hence overall these costs should go down if there is enough reception. But I think the bigger problem is with regulations, and we haven't really seen regulations for drone deliveries come in pretty much in favor of the industry. We haven't even seen regulations in drone photography being very conducive, and the app and the permission system which the government initiated has actually not really taken off. So flying taxis, and with or without pilot, because many of these, Jet Set Go for example is also looking at pilot-less flying taxis. So there is a safety concern, there is a regulation concern, and tiding over these in the next 2 years seems fairly ambitious, given that we don't really have a success model anywhere else in the world right now to take lessons from.
But at least there is some interest, initial interest, and I think it's all the more heartening that the e-plane company is incubated by IIT Madras. So it's an Indian startup, an indigenous one, hoping to build that certifiable prototype by March of 2025. It'll also depend on whether it does get that certification or not.
See, I'm not worried about the technology. I think there is enough technology and there is enough work happening in flying technology, drones, etc., whether it is for military use or commercial professional use. So the technology part of it is not really a problem. I think the problem is really going to be giving permissions to allow that aircraft or that taxi or that drone to fly and not fly in certain areas, what altitude to fly in, and most importantly, you know, cases of bird hits, for example, are not alien in aviation. So these are real issues which tend to threaten life, which tend to threaten property and belongings even on the ground. So all these safety concerns and regulatory concerns are far more important to decide upon the fate and the future of flying taxis as compared to the pure technology, which I think will easily be
So it's not so much the technology that needs to keep pace, but the regulatory and compliances issues, as well as measures that need to be put in place perhaps by Civil Aviation Ministry before these taxis can finally take off, and you and I can take that ride from the national capital, center of the national capital, CP, to perhaps Gurugram in just under 7 minutes. Flying taxis coming soon, perhaps by next year. But with that, it's time to close the show. Thank you very much for watching.
Luxury is now becoming a need rather than something that you aspire to be. So that is adding a lot of fuel. Obviously, government has played a vital role in it.
In a city like Mumbai, a luxury home may be something upwards of rupees 10 crores. In city like Delhi, again maybe something upwards of 8-9 crores. But in Bangalore, we typically define a luxury home, anything which is upwards of about 3 crores.
It's a combination of increased wealth, availability of more luxurious homes, and simultaneously the overall economy doing better.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
40 countries, 1,000 multilingual bookstalls, 1.25 lakh people, one destination, the New Delhi World Book Fair 2024.
So it's a great honour to be here. Thank you to the National Book Trust and those that have embraced us over recent days.
I was at the London Book Fair once and I had not participated here, but this fair is an ocean and it's beautiful.
This should be your annual spring picnic.
Through the power of knowledge, we are going to create responsible citizens, global citizens with global skills and also global responsibility.
This and more. Streaming on News 9 Plus. News is now content. Subscribe and get free vouchers.
A defiant performance by Ten Hag's men. Now standing at 7 feet 4 inches, Satnam Singh is making his way into professional wrestling.
We are getting more good news for India.
There's a new video around what deepfake can do.
We have seen a trailer of this a few days back.
Rollers should not be only on the platform.
We'll have to wait and see how those play out.
Hindenburg's report cannot be taken as gospel of truth.
Hello, a very good morning to you and welcome back to News 9 Live. I'm Shriya Kundu, back here with all the latest updates of the day on all the top stories of the day from across the nation and around the world. And we begin the bulletin with some quick headlines from across the nation. Let's move right into it. Well, we begin with the top story and the top focus of the day, which is the sex scandal around Prajwal Revanna. In the latest development of the Revanna sex scandal, JDS MLA Sharanagowda Kandakur has written to the party's supremo and former Prime Minister HD Devegowda requesting the suspension of Prajwal Revanna. Now, Kandakur has expressed concern that the incident could tarnish the legacy established by Devegowda and Kumaraswamy. A fresh FIR has also been filed alleging sexual harassment against Prajwal Revanna and his father HD Revanna. Now, the FIR has been filed based on a complaint by a woman who had worked at Revanna's residence. Now, the woman claimed that she was sexually abused multiple times between 2019 and 2022. The complaint emerged amidst the state government's order to form a special investigation team to investigate a series of obscene videos circulating in